Welcome to this tutorial on seasonal keyword research and ultimately how to use keyword research to effectively identify trends and build a better content strategy. I am Michael, and today I'm going to walk you through how to do that. But first, I want to make sure you're aware that the products that we're going to be using today are SEMRush for keyword and data collection, Google Sheets for data processing, and Power Tools, which is an add-on of Google Sheets. All of that information will be in the description so you guys can find it with ease. So first off, let's talk about Google Trends and ultimately trends in identifying seasonality. So trends is something readily available to us that we can essentially search for and figure out if there's any specific trends that are happening either today or historically. And in a sense, you're able to find a lot of different things because it's a tool that's readily available just to about anyone that are more relevant to you or your business or clients or whoever you're working for. So in this instance, in this tutorial, I'm going to be talking about Black Friday. So Black Friday is a very well-known thing. I don't think I need to explain. But ultimately, what it is we want to learn about Black Friday as it pertains to a particular business. So Google Trends gives you some data at a very, very high level. It doesn't necessarily give you enough insight in a more granular level. And what I mean by that is more long-term format. So if I said Black Friday shares, for example, if I spelled it right, you would ultimately get 0 results back, simply because Google Trends doesn't necessarily provide that information to you. But if you were to see the same instance in, say, Keyword Planner on the Google Ads front, you'll be able to see a number of different things. And I didn't go through the process of showing you how to collect this information in Google Keyword Planner. I just more so wanted to show it as an example of the readiness and availability of this kind of data that you could have at your fingertips. This is an account that's not active and doesn't have any ads running, so it's going to be very minimal as to what it presents to you. In this sense, I just did a generic search for Black Friday, and it gives me some ideas of what we could be targeting in regards to Black Friday, and ultimately what their trends look like over the course of months and potentially years. But in this sense, I want to pull this in bulk in regards to more long-tail formatted queries and try to get a better understanding of what that might look like for any given client. And in this sense, I am going to be targeting a company called Wayfair, and I'm sure you're familiar with it. It's a brand that's not necessarily a brand of products, but more so known for its place of product listings. So people go there typically to find good deals, nice products, and ultimately come out, with their shopping cart full. So in a sense, I'm using SEMRush to do a generic search for Wayfair. So I logged into my account, which I already have a pro account for, that allows me to see and collect a number of different things that you wouldn't necessarily have with the trial version. So when I type in wayfair.com as the root domain selector in my search field, I'm going to find out what's most relevant to me. So targeting the United States, and my device being mobile because my audience is mobile and I want them to purchase from the mobile device just simply because I have a higher conversion rate and I want to know what the search demand is there for them. So as I do this and I'm looking at overview and position changes, I see a number of different things, nearly 700,000 keywords that I can essentially sift through to try to find some trends. But ultimately, I know my audience. I know what I want to target. I kind of get an understanding from the business aspect end of it as to what the seasonality terms are and what the search terms are specifically for those different seasons. So in this sense, I know that Black Friday is a big thing for them. Like many businesses, Black Friday is always going to be a thing. So I'm going to do an advanced filter search, and I'm only going to include keywords containing Black Friday. Now, as I do this search, it's going to sift through all those and pull out only the relevant ones that are Black Friday. And there's 294 of them. So if you scroll down, you can see there's some dated stuff that's from 2017. There's some branded stuff. So I definitely want to make this list a little cleaner. So I'm going to go back up and go to my advanced filters. I'm going to exclude anything with the brand term in it, which is Wayfair. And another cool thing that I learned here for filter options is excluding any keyword containing, say, the first or start of the year. So I'm just going to say 20. So that could be 2016, 2017. I think you get the picture. So I'm going to hit apply. Now it's down to 253 keywords. So it did sift through it a little bit. So it gave me a better understanding of what that might look like. And ultimately, now I have a cleaner list of all Black Friday terms, and it'll help me kind of understand what people are searching for, what's most relevant. Do I have the content that exists for this type of keyword or query that's being performed? What I'm ranking for seasonally on an average basis, and ultimately what the volumes are for those. So what's most interesting out of SEMRush for this when we're talking about seasonality, keyword trends, is the volume trend side of things. So the volume trend side of things is essentially this: the interest of searchers in a given keyword during the period of 12 months, the metrics based on changes in the number of queries per month. And ultimately, I feel this is pulled from Planner, which SEMRush APIs into. And SEMRush, if you want to chime in, comment below, let me know if that's accurate or not. Ultimately pulls from there, which is collected by Google, and gives you the ability to see the level of insight from there. So what I'm going to do from here, now that I have all the data I want, it's filtered by what I want. I'm not going to be downloading massive spreadsheets, which ultimately you're limited to 30,000 keywords by default. I'm just going to export this list from here that I want specific to Black Friday queries. So once you've downloaded your data from SEMRush into Excel, I want you to go ahead and copy Excel, the data within it, and paste it into Google Sheets. And after you do that, you can format it however you would like, but I like to format mine being the first column and the first row being frozen, so that when I'm looking at it visually, I get a better sense of what I'm actually looking at from the keyword level. And from here, when I scroll over to the right, there's two things that I really want to bring home today in regards to this overall tutorial. The reason why we actually exported this data and brought it into Google Sheets is so we can process it from the trend side to understand the seasonality per keyword. Now, like I mentioned before, you can do this in Keyword Planner, but you can't do it necessarily in bulk as it relates to the more integrated API, which gives you more visualization to the data, which ultimately helps you make decisions. So from here, this is where the add-ons tool comes into play. So the add-on tool that we're going to be using today is called Power Tools. You can easily go to the Chrome store and add this to your actual Google Sheet. You can get the add-on just by selecting Get Add-on, search for Power Tools, and boom, there it is. Like I mentioned before, the link will be in the description. And if you have any troubles, just feel free to comment. So once we go to the Power Tools section, there's many different things and features that the Power Tools actually has that I use very, very frequently. So there's a pro version and there's a trial version. You can trial the actual Power Tools and see whether you like it or not, which I strongly encourage you to do. In this instance, just trial it to use the split function. So the split function is simply that. It's going to take the existing column and split it out based off of a certain value or character. In this instance, we're going to split it out by a character being the comma, because they're all comma delineated. So I'm going to go ahead and select, which is already selected for me by default, comma, and then hit split. And ultimately, that's going to process it the way I want it to. And then once that's done, I can go ahead and exit out of Power Tools because it's no longer needed. Go to the columns to make sure that they look accurate, which they do. And I'm going to remove this trends column because I no longer need it. The first column is going to still be called trends, but ultimately this is your first month of the year. So this is actually January. And of course, every other column is every other month preceding January. So this one would be February. I think you get the picture here. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and scroll and make sure that all these columns have the appropriate months to them. That way we get a better feel for what each of these numbers actually represent. So now the data is actually in the ability for us to visualize against the actual keyword and get a better sense of when's the most opportune time. The reason why I mentioned timestamp before is because what I believe this is the ability to actually determine when the keyword was last crawled and when the data was last updated as it pertains to the research. So some of these are going to have varying dates in which they were last updated. And this is important simply because if you have a more timely piece, that you need to do research on and do some planning and prioritization on, you want to make sure that you have a more up-to-date number. So I always like to keep this column just for those purposes. So this is great. We're able to see these numbers now in accordance to their actual month, understand the trends behind some of these keywords, but ultimately I want to be able to see this from a more visual perspective. So in this sense, I really like to use a heat mapping tool, or I should say a process in this sense, because it's part of Google Sheets, that is using conditional formatting for heat mapping your cells. So I'm going to go ahead and select all of the cells that are represented for these particular columns. I'm going to hit Format, scroll down to Conditional Formatting, and then I'm going to select Color Scale. Now I could do single color and independently mark my maxes, my lows, my mediums, or even other any variants I want. But color scale essentially does the same thing for me, and I don't necessarily have to go into that great of depth. So I like actually using the variance colors from green to yellow to red, because I feel it gives me more of a heat visualization than the rest of them, where green is being the low end and red is being the more hot end, where there's the most opportunity. So with that, I've selected it, I've hit my conditional formatting, everything seems to be up to date. I'm going to go ahead and exit out of this. So from here, now I'm able to visualize each keyword as it relates to each of the months of the year, and ultimately determine whether or not there are more opportunities during certain times of the year for me to target these, and how I can best approach it. So we've collected the data, we've processed the data, we've visualized the data, and now it's ultimately what do we do with the data in order to really be more effective on our content strategy. Two primary things is planning and prioritizing. So as we're planning out what to do for Black Friday for Wayfair, we get a sense of what our target is and when we should be targeting them. So let's say that, okay, we're planning for, say, let's say we're planning for November. So for November, we want to understand when's the most opportunity for November. So I'm going to hit the filter function of November, and I'm actually going to go down to clear all, and I'm going to select which one has the most opportunity, which actually 78 is pretty high. So I'm going to hit 78 and 100. So there you have it. So now that we filter out actually for November, say we're planning in September to actually target some of this content, we're planning in accordance to Black Friday, we know that we have to have everything in par and in the right mindset for those users searching for these keywords well before November in order to collect as much of the volume as possible for these given keywords. So a lot of things I look at in regards to this is what's ultimately the volume, the potential volume for these searches, which if you sum them up is a little over 1,000. It's actually 1,110 monthly searches, which is great. And now ultimately, how am I going to target these individuals and make sure I have the right copy, messaging, calls to actions, and things of that nature well before November. Typically, I start these things well within 2 to 3 months before the actual top or heated moment of the year, which is November. In some instances, this is more so like August, September, October. So we have definitely some time to plan for peak season. And this is ultimately how I break it down. I have them separated by month. I now know when the most opportune time is. And then now I need to cross-reference my content strategy to make sure that my content is up to par against my competitors for these very high volume or high targeted keywords. So boom, there it is. This is ultimately a tutorial on how to collect the data, process the data, visualize the data, and help you plan, prioritize, and actually identify some targets that will help you in the conversion aspect of your business. If you have any questions on anything that I've talked about today, if you feel like there's anything that I left open-ended, feel free to leave a comment below. Shoot me a line. I'd be more than happy to answer that question for you. Again, thank you for your time, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and all the above. Thanks.